Well, Pastor asked me to take some time tonight and share a little bit about our trip. And I just want to say, first of all, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be able to have gone to Israel. I think it's always been a bucket list item for me. I just thought I was going to be a whole lot older when I went. And so to be able to go was pretty exciting. And I think that it was really, for me, it was probably one of the most unique and impactful trips just because of all the once-in-a-lifetime events and opportunities that we had. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of recap it, and I'm going to go chronologically so I don't forget anything. And I've got a lot of notes, and I don't want to be here all night, but I want to try to give you as much as I can about what happened. It was kind of like drinking through a fire hydrant and trying to process everything that was coming at you all at once. And now I'm going to do my best to try to regurgitate that to you. I'm not an expert on archaeological digs and things that happened there. So if you were told a different story, you just had a bad guide. I don't know. But no, it was really good. We had a great group that we went with. We had a great guide who was very knowledgeable about everything and made it a lot of fun and made us as pastors and assistant pastors feel like we didn't really know the Bible very much. Just in the way he was asking the questions, like, I never thought about that before. That's a good question. And so it was really neat, and we learned a lot. And so we can go ahead and switch over to my computer. There we go. All right, hopefully this works. I got a little clicker. I got a laser pointer. So, well, I don't know about that. There it is. It's on the ceiling. That's not going to really work much. But I'll do my best to point out what's going on. So we traveled 19 hours to Israel. And then when we got there, we were very tired. And so we arrived about 9 a.m. local time, which would have felt like 2 a.m. to us after getting up at like 5:30 the morning before. And the first thing we were going to do is a humanitarian outreach. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background about Israel, in case you don't really know, proselytizing or evangelism isn't really something they're excited about. They don't really look too kindly to people, knocking on doors and giving the gospel out. And even if you're trying to evangelize younger people, if they're a minor under 18, someone who's over 18 can't evangelize that person without having written consent. And so vacation Bible schools are an interesting thing. They've got to get waivers for people to send their kids there, letting them know, hey, this is a Christian event. They're going to be presenting something different than what you believe. And so all that to say, when they try to outreach and evangelize, a lot of times they've got to be sensitive to the culture, be sensitive to some of the laws even that are in place when they do that. And so they come up with different unique ways to do that because of the challenges that they face. And one of the things that they have found effective is to do these humanitarian outreaches to build relationships and just to show, hey, we're Christians, they know that, and we're just showing that we love you. We love the Jews. We love Israel. And so that's what this event was. You also have to be careful, too, because you're not allowed to give anything or have it look like you're giving them something so that you can share the gospel with them. And so what this was, the pastor of this church, he's been here in Israel working with Holocaust survivors, and he's been building relationships with them. And a lot of these would have been children when the Holocaust took place, and so they're an older group of people. And one of the ways that they've found effective in reaching out to them and building relationships is they set up kind of like a store or a shop looking toward Passover. And so they're coming and they're shopping for Passover. And so there's all kinds of household items, kitchen items, different things that they can come and shop and pick up. And so they've got a little cart that they go around and go to each one of these stations and pick up these things and put them in their cart. And so a lot of these, they were again, they're elderly, they were children during the Holocaust. Around 120 of them came this day. So here's a picture of us. My wife is at the table on your left there, and there's some other tables with people who have different items. And also, I learned that a lot of these Holocaust survivors speak Hebrew, but they also speak Russian, but they prefer to speak Russian. And so you try traveling 20 plus hours and then learning Russian. It's a challenge. It was fun. I just kind of smiled and waved and said shalom because I was like the only thing I had learned up to that point. But this is a group of them coming in. They kind of came in two groups, two communities, and so there's some of them there. This kind of shows you a little bit of all of them lined up, all the one group. And I was giving out cheese graters and potato peelers. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but there were people in tears who were getting these. They were just very moved by it because a lot of these people are very poor. They don't have a lot of things. And so just this small act of kindness really made a big difference to them. And so we did that, and then we went to our hotel. This is a view of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I don't know what you think about when you think about Mediterranean Sea, but I didn't think it was going to be this nice. I kind of thought like Atlantic Ocean, maybe a little dirty. I don't know why, but that was just white sand and really clear blue water was not on my list. But I took some pictures. This is from our balcony, and so we were suffering for Jesus, and this was at nighttime. We went and took some pictures there, so you can enjoy these. If you want to go take a vacation there, I would highly recommend it. And so we got some rest, and then the next morning, we were up and at it. We went to a place called Caesarea Maritima. Some people say Caesarea. They say Caesarea is how they told us we're supposed to say it. But it's a Roman seaport. It's a city there that Herod built. And so one of the things, the first things that we went to was this theater there. And it's a Roman theater. It was built by Herod the Great more than 2,000 years ago. One of the things we learned about it is that if you look down at the orchestra pit, on the far side of it, there's kind of like that opening beside the last row of seats, and it's the same thing on the other side. And what they would do, they said they would block it off. They had like these gates that could go in there, and then they would flood the orchestra pit. And so they could put on like reenactments of naval battles and stuff. And so that's pretty cool to think about. And there's this next picture here. You can see one of the columns from the original theater there. And so it's pretty impressive, the amount of detail that went into all of the carvings of the stone. And you can also see a picture of what the theater would have looked like. So back on the other picture, there's no backdrop here. But in the illustration on this map, you can see they would have built these scenes for whatever drama or comedy that they were doing there. And then here's another picture of looking at it from the Mediterranean toward the theater. And so it's pretty neat to be able to see what that would have looked like there. And then not far from the theater, you come into this area. And so this is real cool looking. So what you're looking at is off to the left, kind of where you see those columns sticking up. That would have been left over from the governor's palace. And then kind of a little bit in the middle of the area, you see the Hippodrome, and then beyond that would have been the port city there. And so we walked around and got a look at each one of these different things. Let's see here. Fun fact, outside of the governor's palace, there is a stone that they found, and it looks like this. And I don't know if this is the actual one or if this was a replica one and the other one somewhere else, but what's interesting about it is that up until the summer of 1961, archaeologists didn't have any evidence confirming that there was ever a person named Pontius Pilate. There were some other resources where people had written about him as a person, but they didn't have any Roman records or anything that pointed to him actually being a person until they found this stone. And on this stone it says Pontius Pilatus, pointing to that this was his palace. This was the governor's palace, his home there. And so, and obviously, if you read the Bible, he's a central figure there in the crucifixion of Christ. And so, it was pretty neat to be able to see that and, again, have validation that the Bible is accurate. When it talks about things happening, these things happen. These people were real people, and the more that they look, the more they find evidence confirming that. You can see from this picture, this is kind of one of the mosaics that's still left from the inside of that palace, and then behind the palace, there would have been this fresh water pool. And so that wouldn't have been salt water, it would have been all fresh water that they would bring in from the aqueducts, and there would have been walls that would have protected the sea from taking over, but because it was neglected for so long, because the sea and the waves kept bashing against it, that's no longer the case. In fact, there was somebody fishing down there. And so that was pretty interesting to see. It's like, no big deal. I'm just fishing in a 2,000-year-old palace. Like, what? And so it's pretty neat to see that. Now, beneath the palace, the next one is pretty cool. So recently, they discovered that there is a cistern underneath of the palace. Now, Before they got the aqueducts there, they would have had cisterns. That's how they would have gotten their water. Well, once they put the aqueducts in place, they no longer needed that. And so they repurposed that. And it's believed that this would have been a place that they would hold prisoners who are awaiting trial before the governor. And they just, like I said, just recently found this. They used ground-penetrating radar to be able to locate this. They were excavating it. I don't think you guys got to go down in there. I think the Ingrams saw them working on it, but we got to go inside. And so this doesn't look like much. It's a lot longer. It's kind of hard to show on this ratio of a screen. But this is the place where they believe that the Apostle Paul was kept when he was waiting to go before for his trial. And so during the excavation, they actually found a small inscription tablet in the mud that said, "The Lord Yeshua help Procopia," meaning that there were believers that were being held here. And so they were keeping people here. So it's pretty crazy to think that you're standing in a place where the Apostle Paul could have been. And how do we know that he was there? Well, Acts chapter 23 and verse 33 and 35, it says, "Who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, 'I will hear thee,' said he, 'when thine accusers are also come.' It says, and he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall." And so this was most likely what was Herod's judgment hall. And they think it's just because of the proximity to the palace where it was. Most likely that would have been where he awaited his trial. From there, if you walk a little further, you can walk through the Hippodrome, and then you come into the city, the heart of the city. And there you can see these are some mosaics that are still around. This was in one of the bathhouses that's there. And here's another one in one of the areas. It's pretty crazy that these things have survived as long as they have. And then you can look, you're looking down the main corridor of the city. And so off to the either side, there would have been shops and different things where people would come and do their business there in the city. And then nearby, you'll see this kind of wall all the way around this. Now, this was not built by Herod the Great. This was built by the Crusaders when they came. And so this is around the city. So this is only like 800 years old, so it's not that big a deal. Just kidding. And then and then when you come around that, this is the port. So this was actually my view from my table when I was having lunch that day. Again, suffering for Jesus, a very hard place to be. Eating lunch, looking out of the Mediterranean. It's pretty wild. And then you can kind of see, if I go back here, off in the distance, you can see one of the port walls. Or harbor walls at this port. And what Herod did is, if you look at the coast of Israel, it's pretty straight. There's not a whole lot of things going out or things going in. And so there's no real appeal for people to overwinter or any one place for them to come to want to trade. And so Herod was like, hey, I don't want people going north of me and people going south of me. I want them to come here so that I can make money and get taxes off of this. And so he decided he was going to build a port city, a harbor there for people to come and overwinter, and they would do business there, and it was successful. And so to build this, because it doesn't naturally exist, he would bring in boats of volcanic ash, and then he would sink them. And this volcanic ash would harden like concrete under the water, and then he would have a foundation to be able to build the walls upon. And so not all of it is the way it was, obviously, back then. It used to go further inland, but the Crusaders kind of filled that in and did something else with that. But this is what's left of it. And so a pretty neat place, pretty significant place. The locals, or Israel, on their tourist website, they advertise this place as where Christianity set sail. Is how they advertise it. Because this would have been the port from which Paul would go to Rome, and the gospel would go forth into the known world. After that, also, fun fact about Caesarea Maritima, this is home of Cornelius. You remember the first Gentile who received Christ and followed the Lord. So he's the first Gentile convert to Christianity was here in that city. From there, we started driving toward the Galilee, and we didn't go to the Valley of Megiddo. We kind of just drove past it and saw some things, but we did stop at a very important site I wanted to share with you, and that is a McDonald's. And so I just want you to envision that at the end of the world, when all the major armies are gathered together in array, if they're hungry, there are chicken nuggets and McDoubles nearby. And so we did that. After that, we went to Nazareth. So they have this thing called Nazareth Village. And basically, they've set this up to kind of role play and show what it would have been like there in first century when Jesus would have been alive, and what Nazareth Village maybe looked like for him. And so you can walk through and you can see some things. So you've got a shepherd there keeping his sheep, and there were some goats in there too, and they were pretty naughty. They kept getting out. And then you have a potter here, and so he's putting the clay on, and they spin this thing with their foot. And it's pretty fascinating to watch how they do that. But he's there making real clay pots and bowls and different things like that. You have a carpenter here and giving us the rundown on all of his tools and how he does different things. And then this would be a olive oil press. And so they would put that in there and kind of walk it around. And then there's another part to it I don't have a picture of where they would kind of squeeze the different things. And I learned the difference between extra virgin olive oil and virgin olive oil, and then whatever the rest of the stuff's called, oil. You also see this was a wine press, and so on the top part, and they actually found, this is evidence that this was an actual farm that was a vineyard where they grew wine, and so they're growing, or grew grapes to make wine. So they're growing grapes. They would put them on that top portion right there, and they would step on them with their feet, and then you can kind of see there's like almost like a valley in the stone that would then fall into the area below where they could collect it. So it's pretty neat how they did all that. This would have been a replica of kind of how a synagogue would have been set up. Let's see. Okay, this is cool. So I learned something pretty fascinating about this. So you see, it's hard to see here, but you see the olive tree coming off to the right of it. See how there's like a branch coming up like that? So if you're a gardener, what do you call it when plants come up from the ground, the roots? Shoots or suckers or stuff like that, right? You got to get rid of them. Well, okay, so in Hebrew, that's a netzer, and it means a branch or a sprout. And that word is used in Isaiah 11, where it says, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch," that's netzer, "shall grow out of his roots." It's talking about the coming Messiah, right? That he was going to come from the line of Jesse and David and so forth. And so netzer, though, is also the root word for Nazareth. So netzer, Nazareth. And Matthew tells us that the angel of the Lord came to Joseph, told him to take Mary and Jesus and go to Nazareth. Well, Matthew 2, verse 23 says, "And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene." Well, unless you found a verse I haven't found, there's no prophecy that says that per se. But what is he saying that it's fulfilled, that he shall be called a Nazarene, that which was spoken by the prophet? He's referencing Isaiah 11, that he was going to be that branch that would come forth out of David. And so Matthew wasn't making up a prophecy. He was just pointing out that Jesus is the netzer, the branch that has grown out of the line of David, that he was going to be the Messiah that God would raise up to rule in the last days. And so it's pretty neat. For all the kids, this is a replica of a first century paddle that Mary would have used for Jesus' brothers. It's actually a cutting board, but I thought that was funny. I also learned that anointing oil that they sell there has expiration dates, and so you better get anointed while it's still good. And then we went from there to Magdala, and this is our hotel. It was a really nice hotel. It was exciting to be able to stay there. And we heard that night from, I don't remember his name. I didn't get it. It was kind of hard, and I didn't know how to spell it. But he is a rocket scientist, so we met a real-life rocket scientist, and he helped to build the Iron Dome. And so he was giving us the ins and outs about how that defense system works and all the challenges that went into that. One of the things that we heard about were that so whenever a rocket comes into Israel, there's a whole lot of other pieces. There's radar that detects it coming up, and they got a hone on it, and then they send their interceptor missile. Well, every time they send a missile, they actually send two. In case the first one doesn't go off or something happens to it, they've got a backup plan. But each interceptor missile that they fires costs $50,000. So it's like $100,000 every time someone fires a rocket. And when they're firing thousands of rockets at you, it adds up. And so it was pretty neat to see that. And he also explained some of the limitations. People are like, well, how come you don't just get a laser, right? That sounds really scientific. But he said, have you ever pointed a laser in the rain? It doesn't work very good. It kind of gets all broken up by the raindrops that are coming down. So they said, laser would be great unless they fire rockets when it's raining, and then we would be out of luck. And so we learned about that, and then some of the other systems that they had in place for longer range things. And so we naturally asked the question, because President Trump has been talking about having an Iron Dome around America, a gold dome, I don't know, whatever he wants. We said, is that even possible to have something like that around the United States? And he said the answer is no, unfortunately. So the reason being is that it's only good for missiles that are coming at them from within 40 miles. And if you've ever been in Israel, they have the privilege of knowing where the missiles are going to come from because they're all nearby. But our enemies or potential enemies would be much further than 40 miles. And so we'd have to have probably a space-based defense system, he said. But I thought that was a neat conversation. And then that next morning, we stayed at our hotel because at our hotel, when they were building it, let me back up. Sorry, I got to give some background here. So in Israel, when you build something, if you come across anything that might be of significance, you've got to pause what you're doing, and you've got to call in the authorities, and they've got to come, the Antiquities Authority, and they've got to look at it, and they've got to determine if it's something important, or if you can just keep going, it's no big deal. If they find out it is important, it needs to be dug up. They need to document it. Sometimes they just bury it after that. But that's on your dime. And so it's going to cost you money. They're not going to pay for it. And so when they were building this hotel, they actually went bankrupt, I think he said twice, just because they ran out of money to do that. And they ended up having to move the hotel like 500 feet from its original location. But underneath of it, they found some pretty cool stuff. So they found the city of Magdala. And that's why the hotel is named that. And so you can kind of see some outlines of some of the homes and different things that would have been nearby. They also found in there a mikveh, which is like their purification bath. So when they would have had to cleanse themselves ceremonially, this is what they would have been. That's our tour guide, Dan. And then the coolest thing they found is they found a first century synagogue. And they said this is one of the best preserved synagogues that they found from this Second Temple time period. And so there are some interesting things about it. One of them is that you can see some of the mosaic still there on the floor. And then this picture, if you took a bottle of water or something and rubbed it down on it, the color would be a lot more vibrant. But that paint that's on the wall is 2,000-year-old paint that's still there. And they've got a shade protecting it so it doesn't fade away or anything like that. But there's some things that are interesting about this. Here's another picture of it, looking into it. But the most interesting thing is they found this stone that's called the Magdala stone. And it's the only one they've ever found at a synagogue. And they're not even entirely sure what it was used for. They think maybe it was a podium that they would have read from, or maybe something they would have prayed on. But I don't know if you can see, but on the side right here, you can see there's a menorah. And there's a lot of other, if you're able to go look all around it, there's some other temple pictures about it, which is interesting because that wasn't really allowed. You weren't supposed to take temple items and put them on, put their images in your synagogue. That was kind of like a no-no during that time. And so some people suggest that maybe they were kind of doing their own thing. Maybe because of the distance to the temple, people were doing temple-like things here. They're not really sure. They don't really know anything about it, but it's a very interesting find. They do think it's very likely, because Jesus went to the synagogues around the Galilee, that he may have gone to this very synagogue. And so It's kind of neat to think that Jesus may have been there, maybe teaching. We don't know. There's a lot that John tells us Jesus did that he didn't record. There's just so much of it. And so we don't know. Just speculation, but it's kind of neat to think about that. And then after that, we went to the Mount of Beatitudes. And so this is a picture. Now, this is another thing I learned, is that when we think about mountain, and the Bible talks about mountain, I think about Rocky Mountains. They're not that big over there. And so, but it was a very elevated hill there overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And this is what they believe to be the site of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus gave the Beatitudes and taught there in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And they think that because Capernaum is right down the hill there, so it's not far from there. And one of the things I also learned is that things in Israel are much closer together than I thought they were. You know, when we think about going from one city to another city, you know, I'm thinking of going from Covington to McDonough. Like, that's a hike, like even in a car with traffic. But cities back then were much closer together. And so Capernaum is not that far from this side, or from Magdala, or from Tiberias. And so they're all kind of real close to one another. But it was very, very nice. Here's another picture overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Another picture. Now, this building to the right is a Byzantine church. And you notice when you go to Israel that at all of these sites, there's a lot of these churches that are built. And a lot of them are kind of ugly and old, and they are not very nice people inside of there. But they are helpful because, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll tell you why they're helpful here in a second. But this is the Mount of Beatitudes. Let's see. Another picture there. Another picture there. Isn't that pretty? You noticing any trends about Israel? Maybe different than what you thought? Like, it's green. I was thinking it's going to be like a desert and brown. And it is sometimes. But in the springtime, I was shocked at how lush it was and how green everything was. Let's see, after that we went to Capernaum, which they pronounce Capharnaum. You transliterate Hebrew to Greek, then to English, we get Capernaum, it's Capharnaum. But it's called the town of Jesus. And it's kind of, I was like, why would you call it the town of Jesus? Because he wasn't born there. You know, you could make a case for Bethlehem or Nazareth even. He grew up there, so why Capernaum? Well, it's because that was really the base camp of his ministry. He did a lot of miracles there. It's where he used as a base camp as he went around the Galilean area. And it means village of comfort is what Capharnaum means. Our guide pointed out that in Isaiah chapter 40, the prophet Isaiah wanted to comfort those that were distraught and those that were downtrodden with the hope of their Messiah. And so he says in Isaiah 40, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. And so, you think about how fitting that the God of all comfort comes to the city of comfort to bring comfort to those that were diseased and downtrodden and all kinds of different things there. Think about this is the place where the woman with the issue of blood wanted to touch Jesus' garment. This was where Jairus' daughter was brought back to life. And so a lot of cool things that happened there. So I talked to you about the churches. I said they're helpful for one thing. And one of the reasons they're helpful is because in about 300 AD, somewhere in that range, you've heard of the name Constantine. Anybody ever heard of him? So his mom, her name was Helena, I believe. And she was a follower of Christ. She was born again, and she wanted to see the place where Jesus walked. And so she had people take her to Israel, and she wanted to go to all the sites, all the places. And so people would take her around and show her, hey, this is where this happened. This was where, these things took place. And you got to think, if she went there in 300 AD, she's not that far removed from when these actual events happen, right? That would be like someone coming and saying, hey, can you show me where George Washington lived? Well, there are enough people around who have an understanding of the history and the different places. We could tell you with pretty great certainty this is where he lived, or this is where some things took place. And so, very similar. It's not that far removed. And everywhere she went where there was a site that was significant, she would build a church. And so you see these churches that were built by Constantine's mom at the locations that the people at the time said, hey, this is the place where this happened. And a lot of those, there is archaeological evidence that backs up a lot of those claims that this is that particular site. And so in Capernaum, we have a church built on top of Peter's house. And so this is not the octagon structure, but underneath of it, kind of the more round rocks, those would be the walls of Peter's house. And so pretty neat to be able to see that. Let's see this next picture. This kind of gives you an idea of what some of the houses would have looked like. They're kind of all pushed together, and there's different entrances into different rooms. But this would have been kind of a family dwelling where there would have been multiple parts of the family, extended family living together there. It's all made out of this black basalt rock that's common in that area. And then right next to it, though, you have this synagogue, which is built of limestone and a lot different material than would have been used in the building there. And they said that this would have been brought in and constructed there. Now, this is not the synagogue that Jesus would have taught at. This was constructed later, but it was built on top of the same place. But it's interesting, we also saw behind that, so like when I say behind it, it's like I'm standing in the synagogue, like right there where that wall is what I'm about to show you, are some more buildings, but there's these millstones that are there. They're kind of hard to see, but if you look, there's a millstone. And then on the left side, there's kind of that cone-shaped thing. That's the bottom. So it would sit on top of it, and they would stick sticks through the little holes on the little things coming on the outside, and they would move it back and forth to grind the wheat into flour. And so thinking about that picture, it was in Capernaum, however you want to say it, that Jesus said in Matthew 18 and verse 6, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea," which the Sea of Galilee is right there. And so, I mean, he's there, and these, Capernaum would have been an area that was known for selling millstones. There's a bunch of these. Like there's a handful of them that are in the area there. They would have shipped them all throughout the Roman Empire, and so they were very familiar with the imagery Jesus was giving. Right, one of these tied to your neck, thrown into the Sea of Galilee. That's not a good day. Also, in this city, Jesus, he had just taught about or just fed the 5,000, but also thinking about the milling of flour or wheat into flour. It was also in Capernaum that he declared, "I'm the bread of life." And so it's pretty neat to think about all the different things that happened there and how Jesus used a lot of the elements that were very familiar to the people to teach the spiritual truths that he was communicating to them. After that, we took a ride on the Sea of Galilee. There's a picture of Sea of Galilee. This is our boat ride. It was called the Love Boat. There's a story, faith, hope, and love. Well, this was his third boat. It just happened to be the Love Boat that we were on. Faith and hope were busy, I guess. I don't know. But it was fun to ride on. Now, because we were all Americans, our captain thought we needed to have a flag raising. And so we had a flag raising with the American flag. We did the national anthem and everything, so it was a lot of fun. And then we drove around, so you can kind of see, this maybe gives you an idea on how close things are. So this is the city of Tiberias, kind of setting up, modern-day Tiberias, sitting on the hill there. This is looking across the Sea of Galilee. This is part of our crew inside the Love Boat. You're looking there, man, almost in the middle of the screen, a little bit to the left, is where the Mount of Beatitudes is, and then down the slope a little bit is where Capernaum is. This is our breakfast. I thought we got to show you some food, right? Get you hungry, get you ready for dinner. So this was some of the hot stuff we had for breakfast. I don't really know what it is. All the signs were in Hebrew. So it's kind of like, pick what looks good and try it out, and if you want more, come back. These are all the pastries, which are really good, actually. Some fish for you, if that's your thing. For breakfast, not really for me. All the sides you can get, there's a big old chunk of honeycomb you can just scoop off. That was fun. All right, so where are we at here? The next day, we went to Tel Dan. So we started in Tel Aviv, and we're kind of working our way up to the northern part of Israel. So Tel Dan, that's in the Golan Heights area. And so this is a picture of us traveling to see the Sea of Galilee off to the right-hand side. And so in Tel Dan, it's kind of like, right now it's like a nature park. So you can kind of walk through it. But these are the headwaters of the Jordan River that would have come down from the snow melt from Mount Hermon. So you see you got like these little waterfalls. It's really nice. There's this pool there that our tour guide insisted we took off our shoes and socks and put our feet in. It was freezing. It felt like snow melt water. So Tel Dan is the location of the city of Dan. And so the Canaanite city would have been Laish, but then Dan took it over, so it became the city of Dan. So these are the walls that the tribe of Dan would have built 3,500 years ago. So it's wild to think about how old these are, but they would have come and set this up. This is the city that you read about being built in Judges 17 and 18. So these walls are 25 foot tall. We also saw an altar. So this was built by Jeroboam, and he wanted to have an alternate site for the temple. And so he didn't want to have to go, he didn't want people going all the way down to Jerusalem. So he said, hey, we'll build something here, and you can worship Yahweh, you can worship all kinds of people. You just come worship whatever you want. And so they built this second temple, which wasn't really the temple, but you get the idea, where they would offer sacrifice. They also, here's another picture of it. They also built this high place, so it's just elevated. It's on the top of the hill. You can kind of see the detail in the stone that went into this. Here's another picture of the altar. Here's a picture kind of going up to the high place. And so it was neat to see that. And then you go a little bit further, and you kind of come up to a little bit higher. And so what you're looking out at is northern Israel, and pretty much those hills in the back, that's the land, we shall never go there. That's Lebanon. And so you see those hills back there, that's all Lebanon. So you can see just how close they are to where like Hezbollah is and wanting to shoot rockets and fire into Israel. It's not very far from there. And then we were leaving, and we walked past this thing. And we're like, hey, what is that? Nobody pointed that out to us. I was kind of disappointed. And they said, well, that's the original gate to the city of Laish, which was a Canaanite city, which Dan later built there. But that's the original gate, and it was built out of mud bricks. And so if you look at this picture, you can kind of get an idea of what it would have looked like there. Kind of what the city gate wall, or the walls would have gone around the city, so that would have been how you got into it. And you get a little bit closer, and you can see the bricks there. If you get real close, you can see like the pieces of like straw that are in the mud brick, like from when it was first built, and we're talking like over 3,500 years ago. And so that was cool in of itself. And then one of our friends who had already been there was like, hey, don't they call this Abraham's Gate? And the guy was like, yeah, that's called Abraham's Gate. This is the reason it's called Abraham's Gate is you remember in Genesis when Lot was taken captive, and Abraham decided he was going to send 300 of his Navy SEALs from back in Genesis to go do this covert operation in the middle of night and get him back. Well, it says they chased him, they pursued them all the way to Laish, the gates of Laish, which would have been this. And so Abraham would have either come to this gate or passed by this gate or gone inside of this gate. And so it's just wild to think about that you're on the places where these people were. After that, we went to another site called Mount Bental, and this is from on top of it. So again, we're in northern Israel, so it kind of gives you an idea on how far you can see. So if you can, it's kind of hard to see, but you see the Sea of Galilee right there just below the horizon? So there's a Sea of Galilee. So if you're standing on this mountain, think back here, there's a Sea of Galilee. And then you look over here, everything kind of beyond the shadow of that cloud, that's all Syria. And so if you're standing there, Sea of Galilee, Syria, and then the next picture, this is all Lebanon over there. So on a clear day, if you can't see in this picture, the camera's not good enough, but you can just almost see into Damascus. And so you have a really unique vantage point from this height. And so this would have been a very important location. And actually, the area that you're looking at there, they call this the Valley of Tears. And in 1973, this would have been the area where the Yom Kippur War took place. And so, if you remember that the Syrians attacked Golan with 1,500 tanks, 1,000 artillery pieces. Israel, they had 160 tanks and 60 artillery pieces, and they were able to hold them off. And so there's actually still a tank at the bottom of this mountain. And just with all that's been going on there, this place has been closed for the last 18 months, and we were like the first people. It just opened the week before. And so we were like one of the first people to be able to go back up there since the war kind of got started. You see a little sign here telling you where everything is. Washington, D.C. is only 9,448 miles away. It's not real close. It's almost next door. And then on the way down from the mountain, there's this region that you're looking at here. This is called Bashan. And it's famous for being very fertile, very lush. A lot of cattle are raised there. And so it's known for that. And you see here, this next picture, I actually have pictures of cattle that are grazing there, that they raise there. And the prophet Amos, he used this image of cattle in Bashan when he was rebuking people, the wealthy women of Samaria, who were living in luxury while oppressing the poor and needy. So you can imagine Amos talking to wealthy women from Samaria who were indulging in all sorts of luxury. And he tells them, he says in Amos 4 verse 1, "Hear this word, ye kin of Bashan." So basically, what was he saying? He was calling them fat heifers. Kin of Bashan. Like, I'm being serious. So there you go. There they are. The kin of Bashan. It's like, y'all are in with them. So it's just fun. You learn these things. We went all the way from the northern part of Israel to all the way to the southern part in one day. So we drove the long ways. And the next place we went to was a kibbutz. And we had lunch at a kibbutz, which is like, the Israelis, they pitch it as the only form of socialism that works. I'm not so sure I'm there on that one. But it's kind of like a communal type deal, a community where people, work together and they all pitch in and they all contribute to different things and people all make the same wages. I don't know if it's really successful. They're not, booming. But we had lunch there. So it's kind of like a cafeteria. And the reason we went there is they wanted us to get an idea of what a kibbutz would look like typically because of where we were going next. And so not far from there, we visited Kibbutz Be'eri, which is where one of the areas that was really hit hard during the October 7th attacks when Hamas breached Gaza and came into Israel and just started attacking and killing people. And so we walked through this kibbutz, and there's about 1,200 residents that live here normally, and of that 1,200, 120 of them were killed in the attack, and I think 30, I had the numbers right now, 31 were abducted, and 6 have still not been returned or had their bodies returned. And so pretty horrific, and they say that on that morning, 300, at this point, we're only about a mile from the Gaza border. And so we were hearing outgoing artillery. You could hear gunfire. You had Apache helicopters flying over top of you. You could hear the jets that were flying over there. So it's very much an active war area. But you can imagine 300 Hamas soldiers who are trained flooding into this kibbutz where people are just, living their life. It's early in the morning, like 6 a.m. They're not, what are you doing at 6 a.m. on a Saturday? Right? You're getting up, maybe, sleeping at home, but they come and just attack them out of nowhere and just overrun it. They said they have a security force at this kibbutz of 10 people, but the two of them who had the keys to the safe where the weapons were killed almost immediately, and so they didn't have any way to defend themselves, and Hamas was just running through their village, terrorizing these people, killing them. So you can see some of the destruction here from the rockets, from grenades, from gunfire. On each one of these houses, you have a picture of the person that was either murdered or kidnapped to show you whose house it was. And so it's pretty sobering to walk through and to see this. And our guide who was with our group, he actually lives in the kibbutz, and he was gone that weekend visiting someone else, but his uncle and some other family and friends were killed in that attack. So you can see just the destruction, and because of all that was going on, nobody was really stationed where they should have been. It was kind of like, if you want to think about their version of a Pearl Harbor, right? You weren't ready. We weren't prepared. We were caught sleeping. And that's what happened to them. It took hours for the army to be able to get there and to help anybody. And so these people are just trying to defend for themselves and hide, really. And you'll notice a lot of these are burnt because people would hide in their buildings, and then Hamas would light it on fire, waiting for them, just to smoke them out, to get them to come out, and then they would kill them. And then after that, they hid on top of the roofs, so when the army came later, they could fire from the top of the roof, and they wouldn't know where they were. Basically, they would ambush them. Let's see some more pictures of the houses here. This was one where, you can see it's pretty awful. These people are monsters. They took babies and mothers and kids and killed others. We went inside of this house, and you can just see just the devastation and what these people went through. You can see all the bullet holes in the wall. This would have been their safe room. So the houses have safe rooms in case of rocket fire, but the thing about them is they don't have locks on them. And so a lot of these people, they're telling stories that they were holding on to the door, fighting Hamas soldiers trying to pull it open to get to them. And so pretty terrifying to just imagine being in that type of a position. If you look all around the ground, you find casings from the rifles the Hamas used in their attacks. After that, we went a little bit further to the site of the Nova Music Festival, which, if you remember, there was a festival that was happening that morning. And from all indications, Hamas didn't plan to attack that. They kind of just stumbled upon it. That wasn't on their radar. They found notes and things, instructions in the clothes of the people the Hamas soldiers that were killed or that they captured, with plans to go to Tel Aviv. And so they were going to drive north to Tel Aviv and attack people there in the city. But several of them stumbled upon this festival, and you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but every one of those is a memorial to somebody who was killed. There were 344 that were killed that morning at that festival. And in a sad way, a lot of these probably saved lives from being taken had they made it to Tel Aviv and been able to inflict more damage. Let's see. Here's another picture of some of the memorials. And so, again, it's pretty sobering to think about all that happened on that day, and then to think about the fact that people are making this out like this was Israel's fault. Like they were the ones that instigated this. And going there, you see that that's not the case at all. The next day, we went to Jerusalem, which was full of all kinds of stuff. So we started at the Mount of Olives. And so this is looking out toward the old city. You see there, the Dome of the Rock. You see the Eastern Wall. You see the Kidron Valley below there. Trying to see what else we got there. There's the Temple Mount area. There's the Eastern Gate, or the Mercy Gate. And so that, again, the Mount of Olives, important site. Jesus, he was there 3 times the last week of, or the week of his crucifixion. He came there 3 different times. And so you just think about all that must have been going through his mind as he thought about what that week would behold and what would lie ahead there. And then, too, that's the place where he ascended up into heaven. That's the place where he's coming back. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 4 says, "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south." And so just thinking about one day, the Messiah is going to come right through that gate. Maybe not that exact one. It might be. Who knows by then, but... Or maybe that one. We really don't know what that exactly is going to look like, but just exciting to think about that's where he's going to be. After that, we visited the city of David, and so there's a picture of the sign for you. This would be where David would have lived, where the prophets would have come and preached, just near the entrance. Here's another place going into there. This is kind of like a park that they built as you go into there. There's the King's Garden, which is really nice. All these olive trees you can kind of sit underneath of. But there's a plaque here, which is what I wanted to show you. And so what this is it's a plaque recognizing this site as part of America's heritage. You're like, but we're in Israel, so how does that work? Really what it's saying is that it's acknowledging that the spiritual foundation for America, our morals, our values, can be traced back to Jerusalem, traced back to our Judeo-Christian values. And so that was kind of neat to see that there. Now, the thing about the city of David is for centuries, nobody knew where it was. It was kind of like the city of Atlantis, like it was lost. Nobody really knew where it was until 2005. And the reason is because the Babylonians, they destroyed it in like 500 something BC. And so archaeologists, they began excavating just south of the old city because they would read the Bible and they would say, hey, they went up from the city of David or they went down to the city of David. So they're like, well, it can't be up here. It's got to be below. And so, what do you know? They looked at what the Bible says. And it took them right to where it was. And so they started excavating. One of the archaeologists was like, no, this has got to be it. We need to start digging here. So they did. And so, come to behold, they found the city of David. Now, this is a picture kind of looking down from the side of city of David into the Kidron Valley. You can see they built a bunch of houses there now. Here are some of the ruins, that kind of the outline of part of the different pieces of that city there. And they're still just like barely scratching the surface of the city of David. They're still uncovering more from it. But here's some cool things that they've discovered. They found some clay seals, and I didn't take a picture. I don't know if I actually got it in my hand or not. I can't remember. But they had a replica of one of these clay seals. So when we think about seals, right, that prophets would put their seal on or kings would put their seal on, we think about like wax, right? Like they would drip wax on there and then stamp their signet. Well, that's not what they did. They used clay. And so that's how you could tell if it had been opened or not, because that clay would have broken after it hardened. But it's also good that it was clay because when the Babylonians burned the thing down, if they were made out of wax, you wouldn't have anything. But because they're made out of clay, they're finding these seals. So one of the seals that they found had the name of figures that are mentioned in Scripture, including Gemariah, the son of Shaphan, which is in Jeremiah chapter 36. And then they found another one, I forget the name of it. But they found 2 people, like one chapter apart, that are in the Bible who were at the city of David. They were assistants to the king. It's just like all these things are lining up. Like this is the place. This is where the city of David was. It's pretty neat. They also found the top of the columns. They call these capitals. They found one of these. I'll show you a picture later of the real one, but this is just a replica. But also pointing to that this was a place of prestige, a place of prominence. This would have been where the king's house was. And this next picture, more ruins. This is the side of the city, and this is a 27-year-old toilet. So you can use your imagination. After that, we went to a place called the Pilgrim Road, and this is really cool. This is probably one of my favorite places we went. This is not open yet. It's not open to the public, but we got a private tour from one of the people in charge of it. And so, man, I almost want to start backwards. So what this is, you can kind of see that, I don't know how well you can see it from where you're sitting, but if you imagine, you have the Temple Mount, and all the way down at the bottom of the Temple Mount is the Pool of Siloam, which they found. They're actively uncovering it. They're still digging it up. But they would have gone there to be purified, to be cleansed, and then they would have made their way up to the Temple Mount. And so this is the road that they would have traveled from the Pool of Siloam up to the Temple Mount there at the Passover and on the different ceremonies and different days. And so you can see here from these pictures, what they've done is they started at one side of the road. They've excavated all the way down to the bottom of the Pool of Siloam now, and now they're going to widen it, but they're underneath of an existing city. And so they've got to build all kinds of structures to be able to make sure the city doesn't collapse on what they're excavating. But this would have been kind of, if you think about it, this is the edge of the road, so that would have been like the opening to a little shop. And so all along this road, there's different stores and shops that people would have bought things at. This is the only one they found. So they've done the whole thing, at least one side of the street, all the way up. This is the only one they found of a place where someone would have stood on to share a message. So they could have been preaching from here. They could have been teaching from here. They could have been making an announcement everybody needed to hear from this place. And that's pretty cool. I don't know that Jesus ever taught there. But then you see here's some more of this road, and this is all original pavement from the time. This is what would have been the time period of Jesus. And so we asked the archaeologists, what do you think the chance that Jesus walked on this road? And he said a conservative estimate is about 100% that Jesus walked on this road. And so it's pretty neat to be doing that. You can see you're kind of like this tunnel. We're all kind of crammed in there. But this goes all the way down to the Pool of Siloam. So this right here, what you're looking at, is where when the Romans destroyed the temple, a lot of Jews fled, and they hid in sewers underneath of the city. And the Romans didn't know that, but then when they found them, they started breaking up the road to get to the Jews that were hiding underneath to be able to kill them. So this is where they were breaking up the road. This is walking down. Still very much under excavation. They're still working on it. Walking through here some more. Well, this is cool. I made a video of it. So you can kind of see what it's like walking down an active dig. That's pretty neat. And that guide is walking backwards this whole time, which is equally impressive. And then this is coming out toward the Pool of Siloam. At the bottom, you can see they kind of set up some shops, like what it would have looked like during that time period. So how these shops would have looked. You can come and buy some offerings or whatever you need to take to the temple. There's another store, and then here's the Pool of Siloam. Let's see. I made a note here. Okay, so this is pretty neat. So they found this in those sewers where the Jews were hiding. And it was minted in 68 AD, and it's called For the Victory of Zion. And again, it happened 68, that's like 2 years right before the temple was destroyed. And so it's possible that this coin could have been in the pocket of one of those Jews that was hiding in the sewers, fleeing the Romans. And so pretty neat to think about the history of that coin, but we got to hold it, like no big deal. After that, we went to the Garden Tomb. Let's see, there's another picture. There's a pathway leading toward Golgotha. So this is Golgotha. It's kind of hard. They call it the place of the skull. Now, full disclosure, there's two sites that are believed to be the Golgotha, and then the Garden Tomb. So this is one of them. This is the Protestant version, I guess, if you will. Feels more like the Garden Tomb. But this would have been Golgotha. So you can kind of see the depressions in the rock. That would have been the eyes. The nose portion fell off. The mouth you can't really see because now there's a bus station. But that's what they're saying could be Golgotha. The Garden Tomb, we got to visit that and to go inside, and he's not there. He's risen. And so we got to see the empty tomb, and it was a pretty neat experience there. Further evidence for this maybe being the site, this was a garden. This is a wine press they found. And so you can see there, it would have stomped on the grapes there. The juice would have flown into the basin below where they could collect it. And then we went to the old city, and this is the Damascus Gate. This would have been built by the Crusaders. This isn't the original gate, but if you look over that ledge there, down about 30 feet, you see that's the ground level that would have been the Damascus Gate when Jesus would have come into Jerusalem. And so kind of gives you a perspective there how when these cities were built, they just built on top of the other stuff. Like they didn't bother removing it and building it there, which preserved a lot of it for us today. We walked through the old city. So if you've been before, this is an unusual site because all the doors to the shops are closed. And there's not very many people there. Normally this would be packed full of people, but there's nobody because there's a war and people don't want to go to Israel during a war. Also that day, I think in the Muslim quarter where this picture is taken, the shop owners were protesting the war, and so they just closed everything. Another street, you can see, I think we ran into one other group that was there. There are very few tourists that are visiting. Miss Easterwood likes this one. An Alabama shop in Jerusalem. Now, we did run into the shop owner like the last day, and we mentioned we saw a sign that we were from the United States. He said, "Oh, you're from Alabama?" We're like, "Oh, no, we're not from Alabama." So, "Where are you from?" We said, "Georgia." It said, "How about them dogs?" So, for what it's worth. This is it's kind of like a mall area that we went to at night in Old Jerusalem, the old city. You might enjoy this. That's a Trump flag flying high and proud in the old city. Here's some more pictures at night. It's kind of like, you go to Disney World in the daytime, you go to Disney World at nighttime. It's a whole lot cooler. So it's kind of like the old city. So I took some pictures at night. And then we also visited the Western Wall. And again, if you've been there before, this is very unusual that there's like hardly anybody there. Normally this place is full of people. But we were able to visit this. This is considered the holiest site in Judaism. It's really all they have left. It's all that's left of the Second Temple. And so when the Romans destroyed it in AD 70, all that's left were some of these stones toward the bottom. It's also a very sad place because you think about these people, this is like all they have left. This is all they've got left of their religion. Like everything's been taken from them in a sense. Now we know that's not true, but you can sense there's a lot of sadness there, and people go there and they pray regularly every day for the Messiah to come. And you're thinking, he already did. He's here already. But they're praying for the Messiah to come, and so we took time to pray at that wall. Got an up-close picture there. And I just prayed that the light of the gospel would shine in Jerusalem, that people would come to know the true Messiah, Jesus Christ. Off to the right, you can see, it's hard to see, but at the bottom, there's just like a pile of stones. Those are the stones the Romans threw over the wall, and that they haven't moved since then. So that's what it would have been like when they destroyed it in AD 70. Here's another picture of that. Now that night, we got to do something really cool. That's one of those once-in-a-lifetime things, and we got to visit with the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog. And so we were invited to his home. It says the office of the president. It's also his house. This is me and my wife with Joel Rosenberg on the left. He's an author. He's the one who started the Joshua Fund, which was one of the groups that put on this particular trip. And then Chad Conley with Faith Wins. This is kind of in their reception area inside of their house. This is us. The president's there in the middle, Isaac Herzog, and then that's the group that went with us to visit him. So it's pretty awesome opportunity. And we talked about a lot of different things, but mainly we talked about Israel in our Judeo-Christian heritage and how there is a lot of commonality between us and them, obviously, because of that. We talked about their connection historically and biblically to the land, that this is their land, this is what God gave them. They recognize that as a fact as well. And then talked about some of the challenges that they face as a country, internally, externally. And so it was a neat meeting that we got to have with him there. Now, in his garden, remember those capitals, those tops of the columns I talked to you about? These are the real ones. Like, he's got those in his garden. It's pretty neat. And then these are some busts from the past Israeli presidents. The next day, we went and toured the Knesset, which is kind of like their Congress or government building, if you will. Outside of it is this menorah, which I can't remember what country it was. I think maybe a guy in France had made this. And on each one of these arms of the menorah are different pictures of biblical scenes or scenes from their history. And they had to keep it outside because they're like faces on it, and you're not allowed to put like pictures on a menorah. And so they're like, we're not going to tell you you can't bring it here, but we're not putting it inside. But it is pretty neat to look at. Here's a picture of the Knesset from the outside. There's a big glass wall that surrounds it. There's an up-close picture of the building. And then we went inside and we were given a tour. This is a tapestry that was woven that they made just for this hall, this reception area. And it's pretty neat. On it, there's all kinds of scenes. I didn't get any close-up pictures that would be easy to see, but there's imagery of the law being given to Moses, Isaac being offered as a sacrifice, and the ram off to the side. There's pictures kind of his interpretation of what the end times would be, the millennial kingdom, the lion with the lamb. And so it's pretty neat to see just how much biblical imagery was in there. There's this mosaic on the left-hand side, which is made up of stone that they found from all over Israel. And so it's only stone from there. The right side is the Israeli Declaration of Independence. This is looking inside the Knesset. And so you see, it's kind of like our Congress. They're a unicameral government. They only have one house. All of them meet here. I would try to explain to you how their government works, except for I can't quite understand it all. So it wouldn't be much help to you. I do know there are 120 members, which would work out to 10 per tribe, but that's not how they're broken up. It just happens to be that number. In the gallery, if you look off to the left of the picture, you'll see you can't really tell from here, but there are pictures of all of the hostages that still haven't been brought home. And so when they're there in session, they're reminded of those that they need to bring home. On the top of the building, that's really just soundproofing, but they call it the guillotine. They joke that if there's an earthquake, all of it's going to fall down. Maybe, I don't know. Here's another different angle. You can see there kind of the dais. There's the pictures of the hostages. Now that is all, the gallery there is all protected with soundproof and bulletproof glass. Because years ago they had somebody come in there with a grenade and lob it onto the floor and injured some of the Knesset members. So we're never doing that again. They have all kinds of different archaeological things throughout the Knesset building. And in that glass dish in the middle, that black stuff, that is 2,000-year-old wheat that they found. It's kind of neat. Here's some Americans that came over to visit. There's a picture of Kevin McCarthy at the Knesset, Elon Musk at the Knesset. This is one of the committee rooms. We got to role play and pretend what it would be like to be in a committee making some laws. Our tour guide, because it's Passover, they've got to clean their house, and so her maid kept calling her over and over again and her phone kept going off, and so we debated whether or not tour guides should be allowed to have cell phones while giving tours. We gave her permission on this one. We got to meet with a Knesset member. Her name, I wrote it down so I don't forget, is Tatiana Mazarsky. And so she is a part of the opposition party, but she recognizes that the best friends Israel has are evangelical Christians. And so she was happy to meet with us, and we talked about some of the different challenges that they're facing there with the current war, the efforts to try to bring the hostages home. We talked about the need for strong partners like Americans in helping Israel to accomplish their objectives there in the war. And then we had to ask the question, what do Israelis think about after the war? Like, how do you feel about Trump's plan to take over Gaza and make it the Mar-a-Lago of the Mediterranean? And so they're all for it, actually. After that, we went to lunch, and we had a lunch with a couple special individuals. This is Natan Sharansky. He is a former Israeli prize winner, which is something they give out to Israelis that they feel like have achieved. A lot of things have helped Israel as a nation, and his story is pretty unique. He was arrested by the KGB, and accused of treason and espionage. He was secretly tried and sentenced to 13 years in prison in hard labor camps. And so he spent 9 years in the Russian gulags and eventually was able to get out of there. He was the first political prisoner that Mikhail Gorbachev released because of the pressure that Ronald Reagan was putting on him. And so it was pretty neat to share his story. And really, he talked about anti-Semitism and how real it is even today. What it was like when he was there in Russia, and what it's like now, and how important it is, and how he got help from Christians who helped support them during that time, and the importance of Christians in combating anti-Semitism. And we also met with a man named Gilead Katz, who was a former advisor to Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. And he still talks to him on a regular basis, but he talked about the need for building relationships between Israel and evangelical Christians. And he talked about how, you hear, all the liberal news media, they have their narratives. And there's this growing wave of anti-Semitism that's blaming Israel for the war, that's talking about how the Jews are the problem in the region, and how really we need to form a coalition of believers to bring awareness to what's actually happening in Israel and to support their cause. The last day we did get to visit a couple different sites. Some people went to Bethlehem, some people stayed in the Old City. We stayed in the Old City. I personally wanted to see the other supposed site of Golgotha and the Garden Tomb. And so we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And again, this is one of the ones that was built by Constantine's mother, that they said at the time that this is the location. As you can tell, there's a church that's built on top of it. I personally found it very off-putting. If you go inside there's a lot of, Catholic shrines and things like that. It's actually divided up among all types of different sects of Christianity. But there you have, one of the things that kind of put me off to is immediately when you walk in there, there's that stone. And they say that this is the table where his body was anointed. The only problem is that was brought in the 12th century. So it's not even original to the time. It was a stone brought in from Italy. But people are, praying on it, kissing on it. We walked up the stairs. They carved this church into the side of what would have been, supposedly, Golgotha. You can see some of the paintings on the ceiling. Here's a shrine around the rock, part of the mountain of Golgotha. You look up close, there's part of what they say was it. There's another piece. There's the anointing table, they say. Inside of this shrine, inside of this church, is where the Garden Tomb is. Now, we didn't go into it. They've built this thing right on it, destroyed every semblance of a Garden Tomb that would have been there. But people come from all around to look at that. And so in thinking about that, just the incense, when you go in there and smelling it, and it just kind of makes you nauseous. But I thought about the verse where it talks about how our God doesn't dwell in temples made with hands, neither is worship with man's hand, as though he needed anything. And so, just thinking about the fact that we don't worship a place. We don't need to see the tomb to know that he's not there. There's no tomb that has his body in it because he's risen. But I just want to leave you kind of finishing off here with just some of my takeaways from this trip. And I kind of broke them into 4 different categories. One was geographical takeaway, was that it gave me a whole new perspective on Israel that I don't think maps have given or could give, just because seeing it and being in those places, like, hey, I've been there. That's not too far away. Like, oh, hey, we drove past Cana. Oh, that's where that wedding was. And so it's neat to see it like that. I never thought the Sea of Galilee would be the size it was. I thought it was going to be much bigger. Like, I wouldn't be able to see the other side. And so just some neat things there geographically to help me understand a little bit better. Historically, gave me a deeper understanding of how closely Bible archaeology and history are tied to Israel's control of that area. Many of the archaeological discoveries continue to affirm and approve the reliability and the accuracy of the Bible and the historical connection of the land to Israel. Palestinian authorities, they don't want that. The more things that get uncovered, the more it shows that that's not their land. They don't have any claim to that land. They've never been there. They never had a historical presence there. And so they oppose those excavations. And if they could, they would do like ISIS did and destroy anything that points toward a past other than the one that they want to create. Another fascinating detail we learned was that after, and this kind of goes along with talking about Palestine and Palestinians, is that there was a revolt, a Jewish revolt in the 2nd century. And so the Roman emperor at the time, Hadrian, renamed the region Palestinia as a deliberate act to try to erase the Jewish identity. And that name, Palestinia, comes from Israel's arch enemies, the Philistines. It's the Latin way to say it, Palestinia. And so those were the ancient enemies of Israel, but there's no actual connection between modern-day Palestinians and those people, the Philistines, sorry. And so ultimately, when it comes to the historical takeaway, is that the preservation of these sites and the continuation of biblical archaeology really hinge upon Israel maintaining their sovereignty. If Israel loses their sovereignty, if they lose possession of the land, you can forget ever going and seeing those things or ever finding anything else under there. And then politically, gave me a better understanding of the complex challenges that they face as a nation, internally and externally. You think about Israel is very diverse. People want to give Israel a hard time for not coming up with a 2-state solution for Gaza, but if you look, where's the only place in the Middle East where Christians and Muslims and Jews can all live together peacefully? It's Israel. And but there are a lot of difficulties with that. And then thinking about Israel as a land, I don't think I had a good perspective of it going into it. But when you think about the boundaries of Israel, and then go back a few years and you take out the Golan Heights and you carve out the West Bank and you take out Gaza, that's a very confined area that they have, and you realize just how close people who hate them and want to destroy them are. And so, then adding to those challenges, you think about just the anti-Semitism and the global media narratives that are placing blame on Israel for the war in Gaza. And so as Christians, the Bible gives us a promise that God's going to bless those that bless Israel and curse those that curse Israel. And so we need to really gave me a deeper desire to stand with Israel and to advocate for their cause, and to make people aware of what's going on over there. And then spiritually, Israel, it's filled with incredible Bible discoveries and sites, and everywhere you look, they're finding something that's going to prove and confirm what the Bible says. You'll see all of these stones, all of these monuments, and someone, when we were there, they pointed out that each stone tells a story. It tells a story of a people, tells a story of a place, about an event that took place. Stories about a nation that's been knocked down time and time again and yet continues to rise. You know, you think about, we've got the pyramids in Egypt, we have the Colosseum in Rome, we've got the Babylonian ruins, but you know, the ancient Egyptians, they're gone. The Romans, they're gone. The Babylonians, they're gone. All of them have vanished, but Israel's still here. God's people are still here. And yet, even more powerful than the ancient stones are the living stones that are there. And 1 Peter chapter number 2 and verse 5, it says, ye also, as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. Wherefore also it is contained in the Scripture, behold, I say in Zion a chief cornerstone, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. Unto you therefore which believe, he is precious. But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, and a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. And, you know, just thinking about when the modern state of Israel was established in 1948, there were only 23 known Jews that believed in Jesus Christ as the Messiah living in Jerusalem, which is pretty hard to fathom. But today, they estimate that that's grown to over 30,000 Messianic Jews living in Jerusalem, in Israel. And around the world, it's estimated that there are nearly 1 million Jewish people who have placed their faith in Christ as the Messiah. And so there are people who are believing, are turning to Christ. And though that's exciting, you go to Israel and you realize just how many people have never heard the gospel. Just how many people don't even know the Bible and what it teaches. You know, they'll read their prayers, they'll read commentaries on what their rabbis say about different things, but even the most Orthodox Jews don't know the basic truths about the Bible and about the Messiah and the prophecies that are related to him. And so it's pretty heartbreaking to realize you're in a land where God's people are living that was promised to them, where all around them there are reminders of God's faithfulness to them, and that these are the people that God gave his word to, and yet many of them have no idea what it says. Many of them don't even know the truth of it, and they're blind spiritually. You know, I guess in my mind, I always imagine, well, Israel, there's a lot of Jews there, but they don't believe in the Messiah for one reason or another. Right? They know their Bibles, they know what it says, but they've got their reason for why they don't think Jesus is the one. But the more I learn, the more I realize they're not choosing to reject Jesus because they have differing points on why they believe that he is or isn't the Messiah. They're rejecting Jesus because they've never been given the gospel. And you know, it helped me to understand that as living stones, we're telling a story as well, and we're supposed to be telling the story of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the one that God sent to be the atonement of our sins. And I think we underestimate sometimes the spiritual need that exists in a holy place like Israel and for God's people there today. And so I think it would be good if maybe we just close by taking some time to pray for Israel. You know, the Bible tells us to pray for the peace of Israel. They shall prosper that love thee. And so I thought we can maybe have an invitation, come, and I know this wasn't preaching, it's very different than I'm used to doing, but if you want to, we'll just all stand together, and we'll have a time of invitation, and maybe the Lord would put it on your heart to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the remaining hostages to be returned, pray for an end to the war, pray for a spiritual awakening of God's people. And so, as the pianist plays, if you want to come and pray, that would be good.